Viktor Frankl said, "Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms. To choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's way." This is Finding Human with Sue Jackson. Stay tuned for the next hour as Sue explores the human psyche, what makes us tick, and how to live better, more fulfilled and more meaningful lives. Only on 101.9 High FM.
Hello, this is Sue Jackson and I'm online with Luke Albinsk. Luke is in Cape Town and I'm in the studio in Johannesburg. Our topic today is Nobody Told Me, and Luke is going to fill us in about that. But let me just tell you a little bit about Luke. He is a fluent Polish speaker. He was brought up in a Polish Catholic home. He's based in Johannesburg. He's a very successful businessman in Johannesburg and elsewhere. And he also educational programs which are called under Vantage Best in Class, the Maple Bear Schools in Central and Eastern Europe, which I think is another subject for another day, Luke. Today, Luke is going to talk to us about the topic Nobody Told Us. But let me just say that we're all made up of stories of different stages of our lives. Sometimes we get stuck on one chapter and forget to recognize the significance of all the aspects of our lives. And Luke is going to tell us a very fascinating story about the many facets of his own identity, some of which he only discovered in his 20s. Welcome, Luke.
Thank you.
Where would you like to start?
Where would I like to start? Well, that's a very difficult question because it's such a broad topic that we need to cover.
So let's start then. When you got to your 20s, you were in Johannesburg in a Catholic home, and you didn't know anything about the other side of your identity. So let's talk about when you got into your 20s, what did you learn?
So it was an exciting time because it was my 20s corresponded to the collapse of the Berlin Wall and the first democratic government in Poland. And shortly after the wall fell down, I did my first trip to Poland. It's a country that I had heard a tremendous amount about during my childhood, but I had never been there because my parents were refugees and they were scared to go back to Poland. They were worried if they went back, they would be arrested. So we never went. We never went to Poland. My Catholic grandmother used to come out and visit us, but we never went. And so in April 1990, I went to Poland for the first time and met all my cousins and aunts and uncles. We had quite a big family in Poland because my mom had 3 brothers. So it was the 4 of them that were saved from the Shoah. And one of my cousins, Monica, and her sister Agnieszka, they let me into what had been a kind of a 20-year family secret, which was that we actually had a Jewish grandmother and grandfather, and that her father and my mother, they were survivors of the Warsaw Ghetto.
And they were your mom, Wanda, and her 3 brothers, is that right?
Correct.
Were brought up, your mom was very young, when your grandmother, who was a doctor in the Warsaw Ghetto, the children had to come and live in the basement of the hospital, these little children, and often left for long hours. And while your grandmother, Helena Rothstein, cared for the injured and the sick in the ghetto, and of course with the typhoid outbreaks and what have you, she was there all the time. Now, her story is remarkable, but you, after that visit, did you need to re-look at your own identity? once you
Yes,
heard the other side?
so there was definitely plenty of material for discussions with my therapist. But there was also plenty of material for discussions with my mom and with my dad. And then there was plenty of material for an investigation into our family history, which was incredibly enriching. We hired a researcher in Poland called Wiesław Tomczak, who was just a brilliant researcher, and he found a real treasure trove of materials about our family and photographs and anecdotes. And with all of that, and with the help of Tali Nates from the Johannesburg Holocaust Center, who's a very dear friend and who helped us with this process, we developed a documentary about my grandmother, Halina Rothstein. I wrote a book of about 100 pages about our family history, which then I shared with all the family members in Poland. I had it translated into Polish as well. So I became the family historian, which I found quite amusing, because here I was sitting in South Africa and I was the family historian, not the Poles back in Poland. So I found that quite amusing, and even reconnected with the part of the family that escaped the Shoah by fleeing to America, and who were blissfully unaware of all of this family history.
Did they also think they were Catholics?
So I think they knew they were Jewish, but other than that, they didn't know anything of the family history of what had gone on in Poland, what our grandparents had done in Poland, and so this then encouraged my cousin to come to Poland for the first time in his life and meet the family and reconnect. So it was really quite a vast endeavor that we started.
I'm sure. But once you sort of uncovered this secret, really, how did they all react to it? Were there different reactions? You had a therapist that you could work through. What did they have?
So look, I think for my mom, it was a profound moment of liberation, because I think she had been laboring under the secret for so many years. And by her son, her eldest son, asking all these questions, she was almost given the permission to ask questions herself and to begin to reconnect with her Jewish identity as well.
How amazing.
So I was the passport to her own liberation.
And she must have felt very abandoned at times in her childhood. Because if we go back to your mom's life, she was a child Holocaust survivor who lived in a hospital basement in the Warsaw Ghetto, where her mother worked as a doctor. And she and her brothers were smuggled out by Polish Catholic doctors and put into an orphanage. Your mom also does charity work. I see that she focuses on child welfare issues. Isn't that amazing?
Yes.
So in so many ways, your grand's unbelievable strength of character has gone through the generations. You have a brother. How did your brother react to knowing this past history too? This part?
Yes, so he was eager to learn about it, but he's not as engaged in the family history as I am. He's a sculptor and he's very focused on his art. Whereas for me, this became a kind of life-defining endeavor, which has translated itself into the documentary, the book. Then with Tali Nates, we edited a academic book, which was written by a fabulous Polish doctor, Maria Cieszelska, called the Doctors of the Warsaw Ghetto. And it was written in Polish, and we had it translated into English, and then Tali and I spent many months editing it. and eventually we got it published in the US. So that was also an important part of the work that we did. And then more recently, I have written a play about my grandmother and about the doctors of the Warsaw Ghetto and the Catholic doctors.
Great, we're going to get back to that.
Which we're hoping to stage at some point.
Great.
This is Finding Human with Sue Jackson, only on 101.9 High FM.
Hello, Luke. This is Sue. Luke Albinsk is with me on the Finding Human program. You're back with Sue Jackson, and if you'd like to send us any messages, please do so on 061 855 1019. Luke, please tell me a bit about your play, but actually that Dr. Maria, how do you pronounce it?
Ciesielska.
Her study was about the fate of more than 800 Jewish doctors who devoted themselves in many cases until the day they died to the care of the sick and the dying in the Warsaw Ghetto. Your grandmother was one of them. You've just mentioned that there were also non-Jewish doctors. Were they also in the ghetto?
No, they weren't in the ghetto, but they many of them were part of an organization called Żegota, which was sponsored by the government in exile, the Polish government in exile, based in London, and Żegota. Żegota's activities were wide-ranging. A lot of the time they were producing false documents to hide Jews on the Aryan side. They were also organizing accommodation for Jews on the Aryan side and providing food and other medicines to keep them alive. But also what was a remarkable story with Żegota and the doctors there was that they would perform reverse circumcisions on male Jews who were on the Aryan side, so that they would be better protected against Nazi raids and questions and so on the Aryan side. And so Dr. Trojanowski, who is honored at Yad Vashem and who organized my mom's escape, as well as that of my three uncles, he is said to have performed as much as 50 reverse circumcisions.
Good heavens, I'd never heard of that.
Part of the Żegota organization, which was an official part of the activities of the London government in exile.
When you sent me the documentary, which is incredibly interesting, Nobody Told Me. And in that, I read about the reversal of the circumcisions. I'd never heard of that before. And how absolutely amazing. Now,
and it's important to note that these Polish Catholic doctors that did this work, it was extremely dangerous work because, Dr. Trojanowski, at the time when he harbored my mom in his apartment, he was putting his own life on the line. He was putting his wife Stenia's life on the line. And he was putting his little daughter Eva's life on the line. Mm-hmm. They could all have been killed if a Jewish child was found in the apartment. So they were exceptionally brave people. The death penalty, the penalty for helping Jews in Poland was death.
Unbelievable. And, with anti-Semitism on the rise, especially since the 7th of October massacre of so many of our people in Israel, which was the biggest genocide since the Shoah that's ever happened, anti-Semitism has risen unbelievably. It's a shock, I think, to people everywhere, decent people everywhere. And it's in our major cities now, it's in our own country, it's in institutions. So, your story, particularly at this time, quite honestly, of world history, is an incredibly important story to tell because it shows. I have been speaking about bystander effects, about courage. I've been speaking about all of that in the last so many months. But your story shows how people step up. And, Aristotle said, the most courageous is the soldier who freely chooses to fight, despite having no personal reason to do so, besides honor and nobility. In fact, for Aristotle, the highest form of courage, it faces the greatest fear, death, for the most selfless. And that's what your grandmother did. She faced her own death all the time, and so did your grandmother's Catholic saviors, to tell you the truth.
Correct.
They didn't have to do that.
Correct.
Making the film, what was the main message that you wanted to get out?
Well, I think the film was made with my mom's words in mind, and she felt that Helena Rothstein's story had never been told, had never been acknowledged, that she was such a heroine of the Jewish people to make this decision in full consciousness that it was a decision that would lead to her death, in full consciousness to make the decision not to take the opportunity to flee the Warsaw Ghetto, not to take one of the Kenkarte that were available to her to leave and to settle on the Aryan side, but rather to go with her patients to Treblinka and to stay with them as the doctor right to the end, in the trains and into the gas chamber. So that's a decision that is remarkable, and it's something that was unknown. And so the main thrust of the documentary was just to acknowledge that heroism.
Did your mom realize the choices that your gran had taken? Because as a little girl, your mom says in the documentary, or when that your gran was probably like a socialist. She was an atheist, more or less, and but certainly an incredible, caring woman. But your mom must have felt unbelievable abandonment when your grandmother realized that things were getting worse and that the deportation to Treblinka was going on night and day, and that she needed to get her 4 children to safety. Did she ever tell your mom before doing so that she would see them again, or how was it done? Do you know? Did your mom mention that?
No, my mom doesn't recall that. What she does recall is that they were smuggled out of the ghetto, and in the first few days, they were housed in a building very close to the ghetto wall by a very harsh landlady who terrorized them, and they weren't able to utter a word. They were absolutely terrified. I think the landlady was terrified as well because the stakes were so high. And they were living in utter terror for the first time outside the ghetto, away from Helena, their mother. And my mom at that point said that she, as a 6-year-old child, wanted to die.
Oh.
And yeah.
And your mom said
that was the worst moment. But then, when they got to the orphanage, they were treated with such exceptional kindness, such warmth, that the orphanage became this wonderful refuge for them.
And they were all together. The siblings were all together.
And they were all together. Yes, they were all together. They grew up in the orphanage. The people that ran the orphanage were truly exceptional. They were escapees from Vilno, which used to be a Polish city, and they were university lecturers, historians, and literary experts, and they were all looking after these kids. And so my mom and her brothers managed to obtain an incredible education.
It's amazing.
Incredible education.
And I see they were baptized and given area names.
Yes, that's right. At the end of the war, they were baptized, and my mom became a Catholic, and she's remained a Catholic all her life, even though she does go to the synagogue, and she has a Rabbi Aaron Zolberg at the base, but she's remained a Catholic.
How amazing. I come from a very mixed background as well, and I celebrate that quite honestly, because it enables me to look at the world in a very different way, to tell you the truth. I'm incredibly proud of my heritage. Now, your grandmother I saw the photo of her, and it must have been one of the last photos of her. And I mean, she was 35 when she went to Treblinka. Just let me fill in case any of our listeners do not know about Treblinka. It was one of the biggest concentration camps. The difference with Treblinka was that it was not a work camp. When you got there, you were killed. And today, if you go back to the site, you see these huge big stones, and cities are named, and the number of people who died in these in Treblinka. It was a horrific camp. And your mom knew that. I mean, your gran knew what was happening. She even was, as you say, working in this little hut, fixing people. She sometimes had to collect little babies off the train station because the parents had left them there deliberately, hoping someone would pick them up and give them a home. What a decision. And, what about your children? Because it's quite a horrific story, that. Have you told your children any of the stories?
Yes, no, they've all watched the documentary. I mean, one of the reasons that I did the documentary is for my children. And they've watched the documentary, and recently my son Alex came to Poland, and we spent time walking around the Warsaw where the ghetto was, walking to the Stawki Street Hospital building, which is still standing. It's now a school, and so that's the building where Helena Rothstein worked, and where in the basement my mom and her brothers lived. And then we also went to Kutno, which was the hometown where my mom was born, and we had a very warm welcome there. The mayor of Kutno was there. He took us for lunch. We discussed how to rehabilitate the Jewish cemetery of Kutno. So there was a lot of warmth that was shown us.
You know, your grandmother's story is an amazing story, because it wasn't documented before until the book came out. But the one most known for being for saving, or going with children to Treblinka, was Janusz Kocher, yes. And there's a wonderful statue of him in Warsaw, of him with the children, and he chose. He had no children of his own, and he chose to go with them. He told them.
And interestingly enough, my great-grandfather, Stanislav Kon, actually graduated from medical school with Janusz Kocher.
Oh, is that so? And Janusz actually had a Jewish, he was himself Jewish. His name came from like a nom de plume from his books and what have you. He had a Jewish surname. I'm trying to remember what it was. It slipped my mind for a minute. Hendrik Goldsmith. And so when your grandmother sent her children to safety, she then went on working in the Warsaw Ghetto at the hospital that you mentioned. And then when they knew that the hospital was had to be evacuated, she decided to go with all the people. There were some children, some adults. You say that she made a pact, or she promised a friend that she was going to look after her child. And maybe that's one of the reasons why she went. What did you know about that?
Yes, so it was a child that was a little older than my mom. So my mom was 6 at the time. So this child was in her teen. And she really looked after the kids whilst Halina, my grandmother, was working in the hospital. So she was their carer. And this child had very Semitic features, so it was very difficult for her to survive on the Aryan side because of the way she looked. And so my mom believes that perhaps one of the reasons why Halina decided to stay was because she couldn't break the promise that she had given her mother to look after this child. And where the story does become very wonderful and very strange is that this child somehow managed to escape the chains to Treblinka and came back to the orphanage after the war and met my mom and her brothers.
Good heavens.
And then she went off somewhere, people believe maybe Australia, and we never been able to trace her after that. But that is the story that my mom told.
How amazing. So once your mom learned so much about her own mother, do you believe that healing took place in that knowledge?
I think so. I think when you talk to Holocaust survivors, I think what you see is often a similar pattern, which is that for many decades they keep very quiet. Some of them forever, never really mentioning it. But others, sometimes after their kids have grown up, they feel somehow able to start talking about their experiences and sharing their experiences. And some become quite passionate about trying to spread the messages, the important messages that emerge out of these tragic stories with the world at large, with the Jewish community. And I think my mom is in that camp. She feels very passionate about what happened, and she feels that there's some really important truths that need to be communicated.
It's amazing. And you talk about the covenants, and the covenants meant a lot to you. The covenants, I've always thought, my grandfather used to say, life is a hard taskmaster. And when we said to him, Opa, what do you mean by taskmaster? He would say, you'll soon find out. And we used to say, can we duck it? Duck and dive away from it. And he used to say, definitely not. And he would like to believe that we all had the courage to face whatever was coming our way. Those were the tasks that we had to fulfill. So for me, a covenant was not only with my Opa, but it was with a higher source. That if I was told that I should do something, I had to look deep within myself and decide if I was going to do that or not. To you, what does covenant mean to you?
Well, for me, and just reflecting on what you said, I immediately thought about my great aunts on the Catholic side, who experienced tremendous hardship during the war and after the war. And my Catholic grandfather was sent to Auschwitz as a Catholic Pole, and then he ended up in Buchenwald. and he died in Buchenwald on the 28th of December 1944.
Oh.
So there's tragedy on the Polish Catholic side, there's tragedy on the Polish Jewish side, and my aunts always used to say in Polish, "Głowa do góry," and "Głowa do góry" means head up. And basically, no matter what happens, what life challenges, you need to retain your dignity. You need to hold your head up high.
Absolutely. She would have got on very well with my grandfather, my Opa.
This is Finding Human with Sue Jackson, only on 101.9 High FM.
Hello, this is Sue, and I'm back with Luke Albinsk. And we are about to hear a very short clip, an audio clip, on on the trailer. Nobody Told Me. You'll hear Tully Nates talking, and you'll also hear Wanda, Luke's mom.
My mother, I suppose she was socialist, and I don't know if she was no Jewish, no Polish. She was just atheist, I suppose. We live all in beautiful house with my mother, never shouting at us, never being very angry and anything. When I see the German, I was so frightened. I didn't know where to get out from seeing them. And after, everybody was supposed to go to the ghetto.
Dr. Halina Rothstein, she's a doctor inside the ghetto. By 1941, the first typhus epidemic is spreading. The doctors are working night and day.
She worked in hospital. Then a basement was small room for us, and we get there with my mother. You see,
Halina knows she needs to save her children. Through working with the underground and with people helping the Jews, Wanda and her brothers managed to get out.
It took extremely brave people to risk their lives to save Jews. The penalty was death, there was no question. If you were caught aiding Jews, you would die, your spouse would die, and your children would die as a result of it.
These people made promises to each other which were of a different nature from an everyday promise.
This is Finding Human with Sue Jackson, only on 101.9 High FM.
Hello, this is Sue Jackson, and I'm back with Luke Albinsk. And I meant to say thank you to Les Glassman, Dr. Les Glassman in Israel, who told Luke and I to contact each other. Thank you so much, Les. Luke, they've only heard a very small part there, but I think it does just perhaps whet their appetites to know more about your documentary. Please will you tell us how to get your documentary? Thank goodness you sent it to me, which was wonderful. And I really battled. I even asked my son-in-law. Not that I often do ask him for some things, but it just wasn't to be. So thank you. Now, when you have already screened it in Santa Barbara, the Jewish Film Festival, and the Polish Film Festival.
Also the Polish one,
correct?
The
Polish film in Los Angeles, and you're about to do it in Israel. When are you going to be doing it?
Yes, that's right. We're going to be doing it on the 24th of April in Israel.
Whereabout, do you know?
Old Mizragi Conference Hall in Jerusalem.
Oh, great. All right, so that's the 24th of April.
And then we've screened it. We screened it recently. It was wonderful in Kutner, my mom's hometown.
Oh, yes.
In front of 350 school kids.
Wow.
With the presence of the mayor of the town. It was a lovely event. My son Alex was with me there, as well as my mom. And we screened it at the Cultural Hall in Kutno, which is a small town in Poland. 20,000 people live there.
And you did it in Polish?
We did it in Polish with Polish subtitles. Yeah.
Wow. And what did your son say about that? I mean, he must have been blown over by that experience. Well, how did he react?
He found it very moving, and he said to me, "Look, we've got some heavy history."
You know, I was just thinking about that, because if you think about it, it's intergenerational trauma on both sides, you know, the Catholic and the Jewish side.
Yes, and in some ways, strangely enough, in some ways, I feel that my father, on the Catholic side, was actually more traumatized than my mom.
Why?
I think it's a personality thing. I think he just found the loss of his father when he got taken away by the SS. He recalled running between the lines. The men were already lined up by the SS to be taken away, and he recalls running between the lines to give his father a penknife. And then he got put on the trains and taken to Auschwitz. And then on to Buchenwald a few months later. He found, I think, that more traumatizing. I felt he was more traumatized than my mom was.
Did you feel that you needed to almost help him cope with this what was happening?
He was a very private individual, so he wouldn't really allow for that.
Okay. Now, if people would like to also listen to some of the story, you can go onto YouTube's and pick up on, just let me think, it's the documentary on the doctors of the Holocaust and in the Warsaw Ghetto. And, I mean, there are a lot. There's a series of 4 there. So, you know, it's really worth it. We're about to go for an advert, but what I want you to tell me about is how you have embraced your various identities. Both here in Johannesburg, we've heard about in Poland how you were accepted there, but I wanted to know in Johannesburg, has anything changed? We're going to get back to that.
This is Finding Human with Sue Jackson, only on 101.9 High FM.
Hello, this is Sue, and I'm back with Luke Albinsk, and we are going to be told to wrap up shortly, but I asked you a question, and my question was, has anything changed for you in Johannesburg? Your mom, I mean, I think it's wonderful that she's embracing shul with Rabbi Zilberg and her Catholicism. That's absolutely marvelous. It makes me think of my sister-in-law who's Catholic and often comes to us on a Saturday and loves it. Anyway, all right. Luke, that's enough about me.
Yes, look, I mean, I really feel like I've been welcomed with open arms into the Jewish community. And I've just experienced so much warmth and so much friendship there, and I'm very grateful for it, because it does help, I think, kind of anchor me in these two worlds that I straddle. You know, the Polish Catholic Church in Norwood, where I used to attend Sunday school for so many years, and then the base with Rabbi Aaron Zolberg, and of course the Holocaust Center, where we've got a plaque in the memory of Helena Rothstein that's up there.
How marvelous, because especially for your mom, it's almost like a circle of life coming back to Johannesburg and being able to honor her mom when there must have been times when she did feel incredibly sad and abandoned. And even in the documentary, she says that at varsity, when your mom was at varsity, how difficult it often was. Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks says this wonderful thing: "For though my faith is not yours, and your faith is not mine, if we are each free to light our own flame, together we can banish some of the darkness of the world." And
Beautiful.
isn't it beautiful? And when we look at the fractured world that that we are living in at the moment, I think it is stories like yours which shows the acceptance on both sides, and having to work through yourself, to find out the best version of who you are or who I am. And it takes courage, great courage, and it takes perseverance. But you actually say that your motto is it's not either or, it's a plurality of identities, where you embrace your various identities and explore them, and it's almost like an internship.
Correct. That's absolutely right. I've never felt that I was torn up and I had to decide one way or another. I always felt it was just layers of meaning and significance.
So do you feel that it was unfolding for you at the age of 20? Why at the age of 20, do you think?
Well, I think it was the confluence of events, right? Because the Berlin Wall came down. I met my cousins. They had known since maybe they were in their early teens. They found out by accident. And so then they told me, and then the whole thing started
unfolding.
The whole wheel started turning.
Just tell me a bit about the play that you are putting together. Where is it going to be shown? Well,
so we're hoping that we will eventually show it at the theatre on the square, and hopefully this year, maybe next year. And it's a play about my grandmother, but also about the other doctors. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of a play about a class of doctors that all graduate from the Warsaw University's medical faculty in 1930, and then some of them find themselves in the ghetto, some of them are outside the ghetto, and how they kind of work with each other and fight with each other and survive the war and die. Some of them died during the war and some of them survived. Obviously, my grandmother, we know what happened to her.
And when your mom went back to Treblinka, was she able to get a bit of finality, even just seeing those stones there and that big pit that's there as well? Do you feel that there was almost not a coming home, but an understanding of seeing that there is a monument there as well at Treblinka, not only here?
My sense of it is that it remains an open wound, and that going back to these places in some ways inflames the wound.
Right.
And my mom comes out of that feeling angry and upset about the injustice of it all.
And how are you feeling now with what's happening with anti-Semitism? And then we're wrapping up, so you're going to be saying.
Well, we followed what happened in Israel very closely, and my mom and I felt we needed to show solidarity with the kibbutzim that were so terribly attacked. And so we went to Nir Oz to visit the kibbutzim there and speak to the people. And we feel very bound up in the fate of Israel and the Jewish people generally.
Well, I'm so pleased because I do believe that in South Africa we have a huge amount of Christian South Africans. I've had Mari Sukkers on my program, and people say they are very pro-Israel and pro-Jewish, and they are standing, waiting, well, not standing, doing nothing. They are protesting on our behalf as well. Thank you so much, Luke. Craig is telling me to wrap up. I I've really enjoyed this time with you. We're going to end with a song which will not come up on this program, called We're Gonna Make It by Elaine Coe. Thank you, Craig. Thank you, Vakundi. And thank you, Vusi.